Thank you. We are on the record.
Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Notice of the November 28th, 2017 meeting of the Real Estate Appraiser Commission posted to the Real Estate Appraiser Commission website on November 21, 2017.
I'm going to interrupt you really quick. I'm going to read the statement of necessity since we have two members. According to TCA 8-44-108B2, if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, the governing body must file such determination of necessity, including the recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based, with the Office of the Secretary of State no later than 2 working days after the meeting. Furthermore, TCA 8-44-108A3 defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at that meeting require timely action by the body. The physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communication is necessary. This is the regularly scheduled meeting for the Tennessee Real Estate Appraiser Commission. The purpose of today's meeting, with some members attending by teleconference, is to discuss the agenda as noticed on the Commission's website. Thank you.
Thank you. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and do roll call. Thank you. Chairman Randall Thomas is not with us today. So the chairman will be Rex Garrison.
Here.
Thank you. Mark Johnson.
Here.
Dr. Warren McCara.
Here.
Thank you. Available telephonically. Thank you. Mr. Jason Bennett.
Here.
Ms. Rosemary Johnson.
Here.
Also telephonically. Thank you. And our newest member starting today is Mr. Jim Atwood. We want to welcome you.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is roll. We have quorum and are ready to proceed.
All right, let's go ahead and adopt today's agenda. Do I have a motion?
A motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. We have an agenda. Let's move into the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. Let's start off with the minutes from May 22nd, 2017.
Motion to approve the May 22nd, 2017 minutes as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Minutes are approved for the May 22nd, 2017 meeting. Let's move on to the minutes from the July 11th, 2017, which was a conference call.
Motion to approve the July 11th, 2017 minutes as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? The minutes are approved for the July 11th, 2017 minutes. Let's move on to the report of the experience interviews. We have a list. Starting off, Daniel Hampton Quick. Commissioner Thomas conducted this interview off-site and recommended approval. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor to agree with Commissioner Thomas's approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Okay. Moving on to the second one, conducted by Commissioner Johnstone.
I conducted an interview with Mr. Kerry Lee Crane off-site and would recommend approval.
We have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Okay, motion passes. Moving on to another one.
Yes, I had the opportunity to interview John Clauser off-site and would recommend approval of his experience.
Okay, we have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Okay, motion passes. Okay, moving on, Commissioner Thomas conducted another interview off-site for Wendy K. Morrison and recommended approval. Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Another one by Commissioner Johnstone.
I had the opportunity to interview Mr. Carter Higdon this morning and found his experience to be acceptable and would recommend approval.
We have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to
So
approve.
moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. The next one, Christopher Darrell Graves. I conducted this interview off-site, found the experience to be acceptable, and I make a recommendation that we approve.
Motion to approve, Mr. Graves.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. The next one, Melissa Margaret Rich. I conducted an off-site interview and a phone interview, and I believe Commissioner Johnstone conducted on-site, well, it was an interview here back in May. Ms. Rich submitted 2 sets of reports, and after the phone interview, found her experience to be acceptable, and I approve. I make a recommendation to approve.
I don't see that name on the list that I have here.
It was left off of the one that was emailed out, and it was revised this morning.
Okay, I'm sorry. Guess I didn't read that email. Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Moving on, this morning, I conducted an interview with Chris Allen Hodge. Found his experience to be acceptable, and I recommend his approval.
Motion
So
to
moved.
approve. Second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Okay, moving on, met with Wesley Lucas Butler this morning. In looking at his experience, I found that his experience is acceptable, and I approve his upgrade and license. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. I believe that completes our experience interviews. We'll move on to the Education Committee report. Commissioner McCara, would you want to handle that?
First of all, I have a question. Are we approving just the courses for the November meeting or also the ones for the September meeting?
Both.
Both, okay. In terms of the September meeting, the September 18th meeting, there were 8 courses and 1 individual course. All the courses were for continuing education and all were traditional classroom offerings. Do we want to do these separately or together, Mr. Chair?
Let's do them together.
Okay. Moving on then to the November 17th meeting. You should have received as part of the documents my report. There were 33 course proposals, 31 of which are for continuing education only. 2 are both for continuing education and qualifying education. 27 of the continuing education courses and both of the qualifying education courses are presented by traditional classroom instruction. 4 of the continuing education courses are presented as online courses. In terms of the individual course proposals, there were a total of 9. 7 of those are for continuing education and 2 are for qualifying education. There were also 3 instructor approval requests. The Education Committee moves to have all these courses and individual course proposals and course instructor approvals approved. I do want to mention, in the interest of full disclosure, that one of the instructors for a course and one of the applicants for the course instructor indicated that they had been disciplined by a licensing or certifying body, which is part of the application process or is a box to check. I've attached to the report the individual's explanations of the circumstances of the disciplinary actions and so forth. In the opinion, anyway, of the committee, or at least the chair of the committee, I don't think that the problems here rise to the level of something that would warrant denying approval of the relevant applications. But again, I wanted to present those to the committee, to the commission, again, in the interest of full disclosure. So again, I would repeat that the Education Committee recommends the approval of all the courses, the individual course applications, and the instructor applications.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McCara. Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. All right, we're ready for the director's report.
Did we, so that was the November and September information? Thank you. I just want to make sure that I
Yes.
had that. Okay. So on the director's report, we were going to try to review the 4 years of our fiscal budget as well as expenses, but we decided to go ahead and wait for the next meeting when everyone is here so that we can discuss further, talk a little bit about possibility of reducing some fees and just have everyone's take on them, and if possible, might even have Bill Huddleston come and explain it a little bit further so that the full commission understands what we're wanting to do moving forward. So I didn't add it so we can make this meeting a little bit briefer and discuss when everyone, including our chair, Mr. Thomas, is here with us, if that's okay.
Very good.
So we can proceed with the legal report,
All
unless
right,
we've got
let's
any.
move into legal reports. We'll start with the first one.
Morning. Before we go forward, we did have a hearing scheduled for today that was continued. That hearing will be in April. Just wanted to let you know that and be aware of that. Now, I'm going to sort of summarize or give you an opportunity to ask me questions, or if you all have read these and have no problems with it, we can just take it and I'll read out the number and you can go forward there. Number 1, 2017-035751. My recommendation after reviewing all that was to dismiss based on the reviewer's conclusions. This was an appraiser who had a trainee working for them, and it was reviewed entirely as far as that go. The respondent had followed the scope of work and following the appraisal practices. The issue really was whether there was a heating source that must be operable. So as far as the number one respondent, my recommendation was to dismiss.
Move to accept.
For a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, like sign.
Okay, number two, 2017-035771. This is the trainee in the above case. And again, the reviewer did some review in all this, and because this was a trainee and now he's qualified and registered, I thought because there were some issues concerning approach clarifications and sales comparisons, I thought it was a good idea to send a warning at the beginning of your career to say, just be sure you're on task with all this. But that's just my recommendation on that.
I have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I'll second. For any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My thoughts on this are, I understand the council's recommendation in wanting to be instructive to the trainee, but in my understanding, it falls back on everybody. And if we're going to dismiss the charges against the supervisor, I think we should dismiss them against the trainee, because the trainee's under their direct supervision and may or may not have known. And it could be that the supervisor was the one that had the scope issues, so that's just my opinion. I can't vote for that recommendation.
I agree with that.
How long does a letter of warning remain in a person's file?
It is permanent, and this commission does submit that to the National Registry, but it is treated as just a letter of warning, not full discipline, but it is disclosed out there, and it does stay permanently.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I actually don't mind if you want to do dismissal.
Yeah.
It's not offensive to me at all.
So we have a motion and a second, but we can motion again. And
I rescind my second. Mr. McCara, I believe you made the motion.
I'll be happy to rescind that
Okay.
motion.
Yeah. Okay.
Or we could have just voted to defeat it and had another motion, but I'll rescind my motion.
So do I hear a new motion?
Motion to dismiss.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to dismiss. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Okay.
Number three, 2017-037701. This respondent is an appraisal management company. This was a complaint from a licensee. When I reviewed all of it, I have to say that I did not find any violations from the management company according to the management company's rules, and so therefore my recommendations was to dismiss.
We have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to dismiss.
Move to dismiss.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Number four, 2017-040601. This is also an appraisal management company. In this particular matter, though, the complainant is a licensee and did not get paid within 60 days of the completion of service as far as all the documentation shows, which is a violation of the law. So I recommend a $1,000 civil penalty for violation of 6239-421 for failing to make that payment within 60 days of the completion of service.
Okay, we have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Question: Does, in situations like this, is there any way to determine if this is an ongoing problem with this AMC?
Well, not without a full investigation, private investigation. The law basically says, period, though.
Yeah, I know what it says, yeah.
I mean, you don't have to
I'm
do
familiar.
$1,000 if you feel like that maybe this is a once only, you can lower that. That's just where I start.
I'm concerned that it's not a once only.
Yeah,
Well, it might not
and
be.
that's my concern, and what I would throw out on this one, this is our first go-round with the AMC law on the books, and this is our first non-payment. We need to set a precedent that we're not going to accept this in the state of Tennessee, and I would even go so far as to suspend their license until the guy's paid.
Well, I think that is a bit difficult for us to do without a hearing. I mean, I can propose that in order, they won't accept it, so we'll have to have a formal hearing on that issue. The reason I suggest $1,000, because that seemed to be significant.
My
for-
problem with $1,000, they'll pay the $1,000 and not pay the appraiser.
Well, I can't tell whether the appraiser's been paid or not, because this was back in July.
Do $1,000 and ask for proof of payment.
Yeah, we can do that.
I mean, she can put that in her consent order that they have to give her proof of payment.
Do we have a payment policy from these people? A typical company like this, we have a specific payment policy when the appraiser is supposed to be paid based on the completion date, period.
Well, go ahead.
Can I add on to that as well? I know some of the AMCs that I've worked for in the past that were slow on pay. It was clearly on their website, their payment policy, and when I talked to the personnel there and told them, this is your policy, she goes, that's not our policy. I said, well, if you'll look on your website, this is your policy. So I do think that there's a lot of inconsistencies and problems that we're going to start seeing. And so I think if we could set some type of groundwork tone, whether it's for them to provide their policy and the proof of payment rather than suspending their license, I would be acceptable to that.
We can
Or
put
payment history even, you know.
We can
show-
put the proof of payment and a proof of policy as well as a requirement in their consent order, as well as the civil penalty, and they only have 30 days to do it all, so they are under the gun.
What could we add in there, their payment, proof of payment history for the last 6 months to see if we have a problem?
Well, that's very broad now. That might be a little, proof of payment history for everyone they've hired or paid in the last 6 months. We can do that, but that's not really a part of this particular complaint. We can.
No, but it's indirectly a part of this complaint.
It
They
is,
didn't
but
pay her.
I understand what you're saying is,
him,
but
I don't know.
I'm just trying to make sure that we have what we need to address this particular issue. If we want to do something like that, and I'm not saying we don't, we may want to consider sending out an investigator to look at the books, because that could be a separate issue if they've had problems in the past, and we can bring another complaint against them.
How about specifically this appraiser proof of history for the last 18 months? And specifically when the report was completed and when the appraiser was paid.
It's for all, okay, that's for any appraiser and this particular company.
No, this particular appraiser who filed the complaint.
Oh, okay, for this appraiser. Okay, we can do that, yeah.
To make sure, even,
The
even
full
if it
history.
was 75 days repeatedly or whatever the case may be.
And again, if you want to send out, and if you want to do that, my suggestion is, since this is the first time with all of it, we may want to wait and see if this was an abnormal. But if we get another complaint against the same company, I think at that point we send out somebody to look at them further.
As a follow-up question, if they supply the information and we've noted that they've repeatedly paid late, do we get to readdress that?
You can open an internal complaint against them at that point.
I think at that point it'd be an administrative complaint, and we'd start the process differently. And right now, our audit, our authority toward auditing this type of thing may be limited for right now a little bit. I don't
Well, I
think
was
in the
talking about
future will be.
investigation
Right.
as opposed to just
Asking
plain
for the
audit.
records,
Yeah,
yeah.
asking for
Yeah,
the records,
yeah.
yeah.
But I think moving forward with some of the additional changes coming with AMCs, we are going to be auditing records or
Correct.
talking about how we're going to do that. So that's something to keep in mind. We have a motion and a second, and it is amended with additional language. Do you want to clarify?
With the proof of the payment and proof of the history, the last 18 months between this particular appraiser and this company. And
Yeah, with, yeah, the specific date the order was completed and the date that they were paid for that file.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Next one's fairly complicated and long, and it is it's number 5, 2017-043-091. There were 2 reviews done because there were 2 full initial appraisal reports done. This is a conservation easement for a charitable contributory credit by the United States Treasury Department. It's very complicated. And having said that, I am certainly going to leave it to you all to tell me how you would like to proceed on this.
One question I have on the reviewer, have they done this type of appraisal work before?
The person who did the review of the
Yes.
review?
Mhm.
I'm assuming so because that's who we do, that's who we send it out to, someone who has done that type before, but
Okay.
I can't guarantee any of that.
Normally, they'll call back in and conflict themselves out or say they don't have experience with
Okay.
it, so they're pretty good about that.
Can we ask who it was?
No.
Okay. Thought we would ask, since we're asking questions.
Now, if we can't come to terms and understand the full case, because it is complicated, we can discuss how to maybe recuse one of you and do it differently so that you could see everything. And we've done that in the past, but hopefully, if we get there.
I will say the reviewer initially did do and went through it twice, which says that that person was, to me, was cognizant of potential issues and trying to address them. However, that might play on your opinion on all of this.
Number 5 on the reviewer's findings, I had a hard time understanding the thought process behind that one. As far as who the review appraiser he's talking about there and then referencing them in the certification.
Is this on page 6?
Sorry.
There were many reviewers involved in this. There was the initial person, and then there was the person that made these recommendations to this initial person, and that's who they're referring to there. And then there's the person that we asked to review the entire matter. And that person, our professional, was relating to that information from the third person that was reviewing it. And that's why I'm saying it's complicated, because this wasn't one person who did it. This person did it, and then there was another reviewer who made recommendations based on some things who had experience.
So was that review appraiser, was it working for a client or was it a third-party reviewer? Third-party reviewer?
So the reviewer that he's talking about, and I'm just throwing out names, XYZ agency for the federal government has reviewers hired that review these.
Right.
So was that the reviewer that had looked at this report and said, add this, change that, do this?
I'm
and
not
then it comes back, or is this?
Okay, I'm not sure that reviewer was from XYZ was from the government or not. I couldn't tell from the documents there, but it was someone who had experience in this particular area. So who did conservation appraisals as well, and those are the recommendations that reviewer made to the first reviewer after reviewing it, and that's why there was a second report done. Again. To be perfectly honest with you, as I said, it's very complicated, but be perfectly honest with you, it would seem to me that we've got conflicts of professional opinions here.
Yeah, you have 2 completely different conclusions from reviewer 1 to reviewer 2. I mean, the items that reviewer 2 identified, most of those weren't even touched on by...
Well, that's the same reviewer. Reviewer 1 and reviewer 2 that says reviewer conclusions, that's the same reviewer.
That's the same. Why did he come up with 2
He came up
completely new set of revisions?
Because the appraisal, the respondent did the appraisal twice, and revamped the report. And then when sending in the revamped report, these are the conclusions the reviewer reached the second time around on the revamped report.
Revamp means revised, the
Yes,
same
revised,
report.
yeah. Based on the recommendation of third-party reviewer over here.
So it says it's an anonymous complaint. So is anybody involved in the transaction, the person who sent this in, or is this just somebody off the street?
Well, I think the person involved is also an appraiser, and I don't know that for sure, and was somehow involved in this process. And I don't know what the conflict was initially. I don't know what the conflict is, but there's a conflict there. And the conflict really involves the government and the government's use of the property based on the appraisal, and that's the conflict. Conflict involves that the government was involved in getting in the appraisal and the use for the property, and that's the conflict, how the government was going to use it based on the appraisal. And you should note that there was an attorney that was representing the nonprofit receiving the assessment that said the terminal had a high conservation value and was a candidate for protection with conservation easement, so it would appear that the nonprofit portion of it agreed entirely with the professional review of it all.
Guess my question is, on the second review by the same reviewer,
Yeah.
that item number 3, I would think should have absolutely been identified in the first review.
You may be right, but it wasn't. It wasn't part of the first one.
So at that point, I have to question the reviewer.
As I said, this is a conflict of, this is really, to me, one of the very few ones where I've absolutely seen what appears to be an absolute conflict of opinions of professionals that each has a point of view and may or may not be right or wrong, and that's what I see. I don't see violations that I can point my finger at. I don't see them, but this is up to you. As I said, it's very complicated, and you all way know more than I do.
I take exception to that.
Me too.
Y'all don't know how many times I have to read through this just to get the English language straight in my head. But
I've just been introduced to this, so it's new to me, but it appears to me that there's a possible competency issue of the appraiser to do the appraisal in the first place.
Yeah, was that addressed in the first report, the ways that they became competent to do the assignment?
Or has the
History
appraiser ever done an assignment like this before?
Conservation easement.
Conservation easement assignment.
that part of that information not provided to me. I can't tell you. This is what I have in the file and all of it.
As I read the conclusions, I see a lack of competency on the appraiser's part, but I can't verify that. It just seems that way.
We could request more information on the appraiser's competency to be provided to the state, and then come back. If it's very minimal, that would be one thing. If it's extensive, that would be.
That's my concern, is looking at the certified general appraiser. It says he's been basically for 2 years. Based on the complexity of this assignment,
2 years,
you would
right?
think he'd been
You know.
a little longer
Yeah.
than 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all he's been doing for 2 years, and
Yeah.
but we don't know.
I can't imagine there's a lot of this kind of work floating around.
Only a handful
Yeah.
of people that do it across the state.
We haven't even been general for 2 years. Isn't that right? That it says 11/3/2018. That'll be like 1 year, wouldn't it, at this point in time?
I can't tell you whether this is this date here, 11/4/16, 11/3/18. I can't tell from the information given to me whether that's the original appraiser date or a renewal date, and because I don't know how these are prepared, so it could be a renewal date.
I'm just assuming it's the actual, based on the one above
Yeah,
shows.
most of them go back to when they were first licensed.
Correct.
Initial, okay.
Yes, yes.
Hasn't even gone through a
Oh, yeah, so
renewal
it's-
cycle.
It's 1 year, yeah.
One.
Yeah. So is that something we need a motion first to go
Well-
back and ask for?
You can, we will be facing a time difficulty here, because you don't meet again till January. So we will be very far behind if we go back and ask. It doesn't mean you shouldn't. I'm just saying that it will put us behind on this particular point. You can ask for that. You could do a consent order instead that he provide that information. And then if you find flaws somehow, you can review it and perhaps open an internal complaint at that point. You could do it that way as well.
I think we may need to also be specific. What are we expecting them to return to us? Just kind of a resume of their work?
Yes, how many conservation easement appraisals have they done? And what kind of experience do they have with this property type?
And if there isn't any, was it disclosed?
Yeah. And the other thing, as far as, has a reviewer done any conservation easements?
Well, that I can't put in a consent order.
Well, we can find that out, can't we?
Yes, some.
And I would like to know if the reviewer has,
Because
Process of
if you're coming down to a difference of opinion, it comes down to which one has the most,
Right. We have three
which
of them.
one has the most experience and understand the process.
We can also ask in the consent order that he provide the information of the overseeing reviewer that he had review it and their experience. They can do that in consent order as well in conservation.
can I ask a question of staff? On the reviewer itself, and I've seen these over the past where the state would put out bids for reviewers. And so are those the only people that this goes to, or can you go outside the box and go, hey, we don't think that this one may have that experience, so we're going to go over here? Or do you have to rely within that?
We rely on the contracts. Whoever has a
Okay.
contract.
Well, I can
is who we
say
go
that
with.
I've never filled the contracts out because a lot of times like I don't want to go through all this and the pay may not be good and this and that. So then all of a sudden I think, whoever's getting these may or may not be
I can tell you, so
where
Rihanna,
they need to be, you know?
when Rihanna sends these out for review, she does contact the reviewer and ask them if they are comfortable performing a review on this type of appraisal. And sometimes they do come back and say they're not comfortable. So, I mean, if that's the case, if one of the members of this commission is comfortable with it,
I wouldn't necessarily need to know their name, but I would like to know the reviewer for the state, how many they've done in the last 10
Review
years.
that, but that would be separate from a consent order.
Oh, no, that's
Yes,
outside the
yeah,
consent
yeah,
order.
yeah,
But
yes,
before I
yeah.
can decide, that helps me
Yeah.
determine who has the greater credibility in this
yeah.
case.
Because, I mean, we won't even send an appraisal that was done in East Tennessee to a reviewer in Middle or West. It all has to go to East Tennessee.
Right. We do keep
And
it that
sometimes we'll
way.
get people in Kingsport that say, no, I'm not comfortable doing something outside of Chattanooga because that's not where I work.
I would suggest that when she calls them, that she change the word comfortable to competent. Are you competent to do this property type or this assignment type?
In both of these reviewer conclusions, neither time did he question value. He questions the sales comparison approach to value. So that
Right.
makes me wonder if he didn't address that because he didn't know, or she.
And is it the understanding that we bring it back in January for the review of
Oh, I
everything?
thought we were going to do a consent order, sending it to, sending it to this respondent, asking them to provide that information, and then if it turns out, I mean, it's up to you. I'm just talking about the time factor. Getting that
Personally, I'm not concerned about rushing it or not rushing it. I'm concerned about getting it handled properly because this impacts an appraiser's life.
I
and
agree with you.
livelihood.
That's why I was doing it that's why I was trying to do it this way. That's exactly why I was trying to do it this way. It does impact his life. And I thought that if he gave us that information and there's nothing there, then that's the end of the story. And it's just
But I don't know that the commission's going to get a chance to read it and analyze what they want to look at. So I don't know that you,
You know, and I would not have a problem if we needed to reconvene through a teleconference like we've done in the past on a legal issue,
yes, I will
just
be
for
out.
that one
Yes, let me
item. I'm okay with that.
I'm
if
okay
somebody-
with that. too.
I'm out on
Well, we can
Wednesday,
handle it on your,
for 2 weeks, and then I'm supposed to be working at home for 8 weeks, so in January, probably I'll be available by telephone anyway. Prior to that, it's going to be difficult. Now, I can have someone else do it, but it's going to be me working it, and I prefer to handle it from beginning to end, since if it goes in litigation, I'm the one that has to do it. Having said that, I mean, we can put it off, and I can try to get that information for you for the January meeting, and we'll just have to deal with the fact that it's over the time period.
But I mean,
I
I would
agree.
think anybody that's looking at that's going to say this is real complex. Let's not just
Yeah.
rush through it. You know,
I know
think
that's why I had discussed there too, so.
Yeah, no, it's
And that's fine. I will get that information from the respondent themselves, and we will then ask the information of the reviewer that did this. I will also ask from the respondent the information of the reviewer, he or she had background on it, because if it turns out that person was absolutely certified in conservation, it might absolutely change your point of view, since this is the person that made recommendations.
well, and just in case it comes up, are any of you all competent to review?
Well,
No.
I don't want to do it. I'd rather sit here.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it may come down to what we had to do the one time where we have to do an informal conference.
If it gets to that point, we can figure it out.
okay.
So we cannot subcontract the review to someone that's not already on the approved.
I mean, the commission could vote to do that if we chose to vote, I would think.
yeah, if it's under $10,000.
If we determine that the reviewer didn't have knowledge of this, obviously is great at reviewing others and has plenty of experience and was used and said, yes, I can do it. But once we review the details, the commission determines they had no idea about the specifics of this process, we would have to.
It's under $10,000. I can't imagine the.
Yeah, you can do them
review
without a
more than
bid if you can just do like a,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the review would be
Oh, yes.
One would
Yes.
hope.
Yes, yes. And we may have to.
One question I have about that is what sorts of, whatever we determine on this, let's suppose we determine that the appraiser erred, what sorts of penalties would be appropriate for something like this?
That would depend, again, what you find in the end, because you can do, depending what is found in the grand scheme of things, you can do $1,000 per violation if you think it appropriate, and that means each violation, separate violation of the areas of law. So let's say in the end you found 20 mistakes that are really obvious, you could do $1,000 per mistake.
Whoa.
That is what you can do.
Okay.
I think it'd be best to wait and see
Agreed.
what we get. So do we need to do a motion then on this? Okay.
I have a motion to postpone.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We've discussed. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Number 6, 2017-043431. This complainant was the homeowner, and they had issues with the appraisal for mortgage refinance. This was also reviewed. The reviewer had some conclusions saying that the cost approach was employed, but there's no discussion of the cost approach, and that the reconciliation of the data wasn't clear enough. And my recommendation was a letter. It's not bad, but my recommendation was a letter of warning regarding reconciliation of data analyzed and cost approach using a discernible analysis, so that when the reader, and that was really the problem, the issue was found, is so that someone else can read it and can see what's going on. Absolutely.
We have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
I was just wondering if the respondent learned anything from the course that they were required to take the last time they were found at fault. That's just a general question. I don't think anybody there can answer it, but it just seems a little strange.
6 years ago.
And this is a pretty experienced appraiser, too. Her license back in 2005. But I have no problem with the recommendation. I just wondered if this appraiser learned anything from the course he or she had taken the last time they were penalized.
Well, one of the things, talking about the respondent and the detached garage on a separate parcel, I don't know what the scope of work was in that first report, whether that was even included, to be included in the property. It may not have been. May have been, may not, I don't know.
On top of the secondary market, it's a mortgage finance transaction. Depending on the mortgage program, it could have specifically not be included. There's recently been not give value to separate parcels, especially within HUD.
Any more discussion?
Well, again, I've just seen this, so I'm not, had opportunity to spend time on it, but the respondent states that the comparable sales were limited, but then the reviewer states in bullet point number 2, second sentence, there does not appear to be any reconciliation relative to the quality of the comparables. If data is limited, reconciliation is more important. It's crucial. And the reviewer didn't seem to find proper reconciliation. And if this is the second offense, a letter of warning does not seem sufficient to me.
That was kind of my thoughts on that, too.
Any more discussion? Let's vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign.
What does that mean?
I may need to do a roll call. We don't hear anything. It sounds like we need to discuss further.
Yeah.
The recommendation is letter of warning. Am I clear? And that was
Yes.
the motion. Okay.
That is correct.
Is this a rural environment or an urban environment?
I don't know. I don't know from looking at.
And one parcel of land and one that may or may not be included in the other could be a rural environment where
Could be.
sales are limited,
Yeah.
or it could be an urban environment where sales are everywhere. So
And it was on behalf of the mortgage company the appraisal was being done as well, and the instructions from the mortgage company.
As an alternative, could we say no penalty in terms of a cash penalty, but recommend or require to take course and cost analysis?
Can do that.
And in the event you want specific courses under 5B on you've got the full list of what's approved, but Dr. McCare, if you've got one in mind off the top, then we can go with that. But we have added it to the iPads.
Okay. I don't have any particular course. I would actually really defer to the appraisers on the commission as to what course that they believe, based upon the presenters and so forth, would be most appropriate. I would suggest one that's more recent than kind of a long-standing course, but one that we've approved recently might be advisable since it would have the most kind of recent information in it.
Why don't we try another vote and maybe get another recommendation from there? All those in favor say aye. Of the motion that's on to it.
Looks like it failed. The motion as is, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
So we need a new motion.
Unless you would have said the ayes have it.
I didn't say it.
I guess my only, concern, like Dr. McCarron, was it sounds like a very similar issue happened prior.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this almost I'd be surprised if it weren't some same bullet points in the previous appraisal that he get a $500 civil penalty and 15-hour residential report writing. I don't know what other class covers the items in here other than residential report writing.
Well, it could require taking another course in report writing, and also add one on the cost approach to the appraiser.
Well, it's not even really indicated in here that the cost approach was incorrect, other than he just didn't discuss it in his reconciliation.
Mm-hmm. Then I guess it does come down more to report writing, is what you're saying.
Seems to me that he's already taken the report writing course and it didn't benefit. I'm assuming it's to him,
Okay.
the individual. Being a second offense, I would suggest a civil penalty. Something.
Is that a motion?
Well, if we need to get it started, I would make a motion of $1,000 civil penalty.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Last one for me for today. 2017-048, number 7. 2017-048-121. This was a complaint from a homeowner, and they alleged that the appraisal was not complete. This was also reviewed. The reviewer said that there were some minor issues with the report, but did say there was no support for the land value allowance and no analysis by an appropriate appraisal method. My recommendation, and that the sales approach did not bracket the subsequent size, leaving questions about the credibility. My recommendation was a letter of warning regarding cost and sales of comparison approach.
We have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Move to accept.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
That completes my portion of the legal report. I'll talk to you by telephone in January. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to continue? Okay. Number 8, 2017-035671. This complaint was filed by an appraisal compliance manager for U.S. Bank. They basically sent the respondent a summary of the concerns that they had with the respondent's appraisal report and gave him an opportunity to respond. And I bullet pointed the concerns that they had, and also bullet pointed the violations, the use PAP violations that they felt had been committed. The respondent does not believe the complaint is warranted, and he basically didn't really say much other than he determined the scope of work required for this assignment, applied it, and performed the due diligence necessary to produce a credible report. And the expert reviewer found 5 violations. Those are also bullet pointed. So council recommends no civil penalty and a total of 30 hours of educational courses above and beyond the requirement for licensed appraisers due to the lack of disciplinary history and based on the 5 violations stated above. And I recommended the breakdown of those 30 hours be 15 hours of sales comparison approach courses and 15 hours of report writing education course.
We have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Again, that's a very experienced appraiser, but boy, that's a lot of coursework. That's going to be an expensive undertaking and maybe well-deserved.
I have a question, counsel. The complaint was filed by the officer at the bank, or at the client's, and they outlined these items for them to revise in the report. The bullet points.
Yes, or just, respond to and explain.
So they said, okay, either respond to, explain, or revise these and resubmit the report.
Yes.
And then, do we know if they did that or not did that?
The respondent did respond, and I think I kind of summarized what the respondent said to each bullet point at the end, the last sentence. But he did not change anything after.
Well, you're talking about the respondent, his response to our reviewers' questions.
No, he actually responded to the officer before I think this complaint was sent in. So I kind of summarized what he said to the officer, the last sentence.
Okay, so the officer, so the officer said these are the problems, and then went on further and said because of these problems, these are the use PAP violations.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a specific.
Oh, okay, so he didn't just say here's the issues, fix them and send it back, and then secondly thought, well, okay, so all this is one letter to him.
Yes.
To the appraiser.
Yes.
Here's the problems. Here's how they compare to use PAP.
Right, and then the expert, and then I guess because the respondent didn't change anything and didn't give, the answers they wanted, they filed this complaint, and then we had the expert review it.
Gotcha.
And then those last bullet points are what the expert thought. These are the use PAP violations that were actually committed.
One thing I would add to the recommendation is they get a more current dictionary, because it's now a 6th edition and not a 4th edition.
I think that is important, and I will add those terms in a kind way. 6th edition is the most recent? Thank you for that.
Any more discussion?
It seems to me that 30 hours might be overkill. I don't know. I think the 15-hour report writing course might be sufficient since it's a first offense. Yeah, I think that's right. I don't know of a 15-hour sales comparison approach course. You'd have to take like a 30-hour one to get 15 hours. Unless the state has one that I don't approve that I don't know of.
There was one.
Ones that are used for qualifying education require 30 hours. So there may be something that's 15, but I'm not sure. But there is a 15-hour report writing course.
I tend to agree with you. I would be okay with revising my recommendation for a consent order with just 15 hours of report writing instead of the 30.
I think most of those issues are covered in that course.
I would agree.
Well, was there the problem primarily with the report writing, not with the approach that was taken with regard to sales comparison?
There's one violation that's specifically related to sales comparison analysis. The respondent only provided a limited degree of analysis, but the rest of the violations, I think the other 4 would be covered in the report writing.
Actually, that one is also covered in the report writing.
So it might be duplicative for them to take both courses.
That might be reasonable then to just reduce it to the 15 hours of report writing.
Has the commission ever required somebody after taking these courses to submit another report for review after taking it? Is that something that can be done?
Not since I've been working with the appraiser board. I've not seen that.
I don't think we have. We just have to, if the report comes in, make a decision. If the report's still bad, what do we do then? We'd have to administratively treat it as a brand-new complaint.
I've always thought that requiring a course and then not following up as to whether they learned anything is not necessarily going to be a good result. So I didn't know.
Maybe right. That may be, when we see courses offered and the complaint's similar the next time around, that's a concern that I know the commission has posed. It sounds like the motion failed.
Yes.
We're looking at amending it.
We didn't vote.
Oh, okay.
Let's go ahead and vote. The motion, I believe, on the floor was to accept the recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, like sign.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion.
Roll call. Roll call, sir.
Roll call.
So the motion on the table is to accept the recommendation as stated for case number 8, which is a total of 30 hours, 15 for sales comparison and 15 for report writing. I will start with Rex Garrison.
No.
Okay. Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Dr. McCara.
No.
Jason Bennett.
No.
Rosemary Johnson.
No.
Jim Atwood.
No.
Okay, so the motion failed for a total of 6 to 1. Thank you.
Or another motion.
I make a motion that we require the respondent to take a 15-hour report writing course.
Second.
Will there be a sentence on the dictionary too?
Yes.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Thank you. Number 9.
Number 9 is 2017-039-081. The complainant alleges the respondent's appraisal is not a competent or accurate report and is deficient. Basically, the complainant takes issue with the respondent's comparables. The 3 rental comparables were smaller in square footage, didn't include information about a second rental unit that the subject property had. The complainant also felt that the 3 sales comparables used homes that were either uninhabitable in a completely different neighborhood, and again, considerably smaller, and were either a distressed sale or being sold as is, while the subject property is a 6-bedroom, 4.5 bath, almost 3,150 square feet home that's been newly renovated. It's currently leased. It's in excellent condition with attractive new features. The respondent states that she researched for comparables in this market by doing a search within the immediate area, so within 1 mile, but that did not return sufficient data. So she expanded the search area within the neighborhood boundaries, which do include different zip codes for 1 year prior to the effective date. The respondent also states the rental data was also scarce, as many owners handle rental properties themselves and do not publicize the amount of rent received. And the respondent explains why she used the 3 comparables. She addressed each one, and I summarized those in those 3 bullet points. The expert reviewer found many violations in the respondent's report, and in conclusion, the expert stated that the analysis and opinions and conclusions were not credible, and the report is not compliant with USPAP. The conclusion was based on the lack of information, explanation, and support provided. Although the expert believes respondent rendered an objective and impartial opinion of value, due to the lack of analysis, the opinions and conclusions lack credibility. And counsel noted over 15 violations, but due to the lack of disciplinary history and lack of malicious intent, counsel recommends a $2,000 civil penalty and 30 hours of educational courses. 15 to be in sales comparison approach and 15 to be in report writing.
We have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
It seems like this is a rental property, so just to get the discussion going, I would make a motion that there is a civil penalty of $2,000, 30 hours of education that would include not sales comparison but income approach, and 15 hours.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion? I have one concern with regard to the reviewer's comments. It's the one pertaining to a fee simple value in a hypothetical condition. You would not have to do a hypothetical condition to value the fee simple. The fee simple is always there, and that's not a hypothetical condition.
What point is that, Rex?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a 6 bullet point under the reviewer's findings. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
I just want to make sure I have this right. The motion that passed was for 15 hours income approach courses and 15 hours of report writing,
Yes,
and the $2,000.
$2,000, so, yeah.
Thank you. Number 10, 2017-040761. The complainant is a licensed real estate agent, and he filed this complaint against respondent who was hired to appraise the subject property listed by the complainant. The complainant takes issue with the fact respondent only spent 15 to 20 minutes, according to the complainant, at the property, which is 7 acres, 3,300 square feet. The complainant saw the respondent take some photos and measurements. Basically, the value, the opinion of value, the complainant feels is too low. The respondent states that he's been appraising property in Middle Tennessee for 32 years, has an MAI designation and SRA designation, basically has had a license for as long as there's been one that's been required. He's had a the expert reviewer found violations in the appraisal report and concluded that based on his research and analysis of the pertinent supporting documentation, respondent's report is deficient in its compliance with USPAP, and therefore the credibility of the results is impaired due to the type and extent of the noncompliance. Counsel considers respondent's disciplinary history of one letter of instruction from 2010 and the extent of the multiple violations, and recommends a $1,000 civil penalty and 15 hours of coursework and report writing.
We have a recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Move to accept.
Is there a second? Okay, we have a second. Discussion? I have a question on the easement. The respondent, I think, addressed it in their response, so there was nothing in the report concerning the easement?
I'm looking, just give me one moment. That is what, yes, I believe there was nothing in the report regarding the easement. And the farm manager, I feel like the farm manager mentioned something. Hold on. Respondent could not find any comparables that had similar easement accesses that had been listed or sold in the recent months, and states that some of the comparables used in the disputing appraisal report were actually farther away. Let's see. Respondent failed to perform sufficient due diligence to locate an easement that was recorded by warranty deed and did not describe the easement or analyze the possible effects it would have on the value.
They didn't address it in the report?
No.
Okay.
These were access easements, not transmission lines or gas lines. It was for access only.
Yes, they were all access easements.
And in some counties and cities, an access easement is not necessarily a legal buildable easement. It's legal access, but not necessarily buildable access. So none of that was discussed, although there was a house on it, which could have been grandfathered or could be legal.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Aye. Motion. Roll call.
We're going to go ahead and do roll call on number 10. Rex Garrison,
No.
Mark Johnston,
No.
Dr. McCara,
Aye.
Jason Bennett,
No.
Rosemary Johnson,
No.
Jim Atwood.
Abstain.
Okay, we still have 4 noes and 1 yes, so therefore it did not pass. We will need a new motion.
I should recuse myself from this one.
I guess my question would be, what's the issue with the recommendation? Is it the coursework or the penalty, the cash penalty, or just the general opinion that there was a problem?
I guess my question is, the complaint was because of undervaluation. When reading through the reviewer's recommendation, it looks more like it could be an overvaluation.
I would say in a lot of our complaints that we do receive, the first thing the complainant says is the property was, so,
Right.
I mean, that's pretty generic that comes in on the complaints.
Obviously, I live out in this area, and there are a lot of easements out there. I mean, there are a lot of properties that have either transmission lines or gas lines, or cell phone towers are everywhere out there. So those who do not have are looked at much, much more favorably than those that do have easements. The fact that that was missed, I feel like, is a, I guess she didn't miss it, obviously, because she, discussed it in her follow-up, but the fact that it was not in the report, that's a problem.
A narrative report or a form report?
Honestly, I want to make sure I know the difference as you know it.
Well, I mean, was it like on, because it was 7 acres with a 3,300 square foot home, right?
Yes.
So was it on like a URAR
Residential form where it's,
form, or was it a
it's almost pre-printed and then
pre-printed, you
the,
check box in?
Appraisal report?
yes.
I mean, it was about 40, 50 pages, I believe, and
So narrative, almost like this is written, the
Was it-
legal form, or these legal documents, it's just narrative, everything's described with,
yeah, I mean, I would say that.
There was no,
Grid pages with
got a
numbers,
copy of
pluses and minuses.
I mean, I've got it on my desk.
Okay.
I can
if you
have her go
saw a
grab it.
form report, would you
I
recognize?
feel like I don't want to answer the
that would
question
be
without.
a form report. This isn't a URAR, but it's an ag report, and it's a form.
Oh, I don't think
They're
it was
just
like.
check boxes?
No, I don't think it. No, I don't think it was like that.
But it
There
was
was-
a narrative.
Yes, there was a lot of
Writing,
summaries
right.
and words.
Okay.
I asked Dad is, a lot of times I'll see on a form report, they just check a box or they don't check a box, and, they think because it's not on the form, they don't have to address it. Whereas in a narrative report, those things, you're gonna address it because you just kind of, to me, it would be harder to miss in a narrative report than it would be in a checkbox report, than personally.
Have a new motion, do we?
Nothing.
So what it is, we've got 15 of the coursework. Is that the appropriate course, you think? Report writing, or if it's, dealing with easements and valuations and impact, is there something else that would be better?
Class.
You've got it on your iPads. 5B is the list of the current courses, if that helps any. Yes.
Yeah.
Where's that at? I'm sorry.
And that's a course too, I believe.
You go back
Yeah,
to
that
your-
is I just was
Yeah.
flipping through looking for
Yeah.
easements, and it said conservation easements.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we just want something on easements in general.
I don't know of one partial interests or.
I guess the other thing was addressed in there was highest and best use, was it? Was that a comment in there?
That was a problem with this.
Especially there, when a lot of the property out there is being subdivided. And it looks like the property was in Franklin, based on the comments.
Yeah. I can't, it almost.
Yeah, I don't see anything in here, just trying to buzz through, except for
It almost
conservation.
goes all the way back to a principles class where you discuss easements and,
Oh, I'm sorry. Your tummy hurt.
Is there any way we could ask for the phone to be muted? Thank you. If we do a vote, I'll make sure to give everyone time to get back on. Thank you.
What about advanced land valuation? Would that have anything in there?
I was gonna, that's definitely an issue. The land valuation and the easements, I think, are the two and the highest and best use,
yeah,
or the three main.
Let's look at a land valuation and highest and best use.
So, seven, is it 7 each?
Well, the one I'm looking here, I don't recall the provider, but the item number was 2040. It's a 7-hour class, CE 2040.
And that one is, what's
That's
the title?
advanced land valuation.
Okay.
That's just one that popped out. I was continuing to.
Highest and best use.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not even sure just those two are adequate.
There's 7 for sales comparables.
Ms. Johnson and Dr. McCara, I hate to bug you. Could either or both of you make sure that we're on mute? Something's echoing in the recording.
Okay.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I think it's my phone here. It's a little noise here.
Thank you.
If we're doing 7 hours, we'll only end up with
14 right now.
14 or, yeah.
14 or
Well,
21.
do we have to limit it to 2 classes? I mean,
No.
if we find something that's appropriate?
No, there's no limit, really.
Wait a minute, am I still, can you still hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if I'd lost the connection or not. Sorry.
Thank you.
Advance land, was that a 7?
Yes, it's 7.
Are you looking at course 2057, the one solving land valuation puzzles?
Below it on your iPad on page 8.
This is one of the courses that was approved in this round for the November meeting.
Dr. McCarris, so far they have a 7-hour course on advanced land valuation and a 7-hour course on highest and best use.
That's fine. Actually, in terms of the content of the courses, I have to defer to my commissioner colleagues who are actual appraisers. I look at other things, or whether the course meets the standards for approval.
Absolutely.
Not the content so much.
I think right now they're debating on adding another course or 2.
I'm doing the math on if we say a certain number of hours and we're throwing in a couple 7 hours and then a 15-hour, that comes up to 29, not 30.
Yeah, and remember this is above and beyond what they have to do for CE anyway,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
But
Well, would 29 hours be acceptable?
Oh, yes.
So 30?
Yes,
Say-
absolutely.
say like 29 hours.
Yes. You
So
can do any
essentially,
number. It doesn't
usu-
have to be an even number.
Usually what we write in our consent orders is just a 7-hour course on advanced land valuation. So if they wanted to take the advanced one, or if they thought the solving land valuation in puzzles was more appropriate for
Right.
them, they can
Okay.
take.
Okay.
Okay. So we've got a 7-hour advanced land valuation course, a 7-hour highest and best use course, plus the 15-hour report writing course, and then the $1,000 civil penalty.
I would take off the $1,000 and
Okay.
get them educated.
Is that a new
So-
motion?
Yes. For a second.
Second.
Any more discussion?
Can we restate the motion?
Oh, yes. So the motion is for the authorization of a consent order with 7 hours of advanced land valuation course, 7 hours of highest and best use course, and 15 hours of report writing courses, for a total of 29 hours above and beyond what is required.
Any other discussion?
My only other concern is the fact that she lists in here that she had her trainee with her.
Would say that. It was not an issue that was brought up, but she did offer that information.
Right. And I hate to say this, but she's training somebody.
You suggesting that something be done to the trainee, or that the trainee be removed, or that, I don't know that that's something that lies within the scope of this.
I would have to look
Issue.
and see what kind of authority we had to either.
If that's
know,
the case, we need to go back and look at the trainees of everybody that's come through here earlier today, because they're all going to probably have a trainee or two.
Yeah, I know. I'm just
So,
saying, specifically addressed in here. I don't remember reading it before.
They may indirectly benefit from the education.
And I don't know, like maybe if, Erica could put something in there like, please pass down what you've learned from this to your trainee, just to make the trainee aware that.
we don't, the trainee could have been there 3 weeks or
Yeah, because
6
like
months, you don't know.
like you said,
I mean,
she
it's-
this person told us they had a trainee. Probably most people don't tell us in their response that they have trainees with them, or.
I don't know if it was, I guess,
Trainee signed a report, then in my opinion, we're dealing with a different animal, because then you sign it, you buy it.
I mean, were they listed as getting credit for the report?
I don't believe so. I would have
Okay.
to double check to be sure, but to the best of my memory,
Okay.
no.
And this may not be an issue at all, but the fact that, is there anything that addresses if your sponsor has disciplinary action? I mean, it's just fine?
I will look into that and let you
Okay.
know.
If there is, I would say we need to look at everything we've done today, starting with the first case. Because if we're going to do it with one, we're going to do it with all of them.
Correct.
What we do have is that you cannot be a sponsor if you've had any kind of disciplinary action in the past 3 years.
If they're currently, do we remove? So,
And it wouldn't probably come up and be volunteered, as you said, so we would struggle there a little bit.
I would put a trainee at a disadvantage too. If they lose their sponsorship, they could be unemployed.
It's hard enough for them to find sponsors as is.
Right.
And you could easily look on anybody's.
So if they've had discipline in the last 3 years, they can't be a sponsor, but if they're actively have a trainee and they have discipline, it's okay.
Complaint hasn't been resolved, it could be dismissed, and we wouldn't want to stop it.
But I'm saying at that point, if we do determine there's an issue, to your point, I understand it puts a trainee in a terrible position.
It almost seemed to me that would have to be something we need to put in the future rules.
I mean, I
How
think
we're
this is
gonna-
definitely something that I want to look into from a legal perspective to see what we have on the books currently in statute and rule, and then I think it's definitely something we should discuss in
That's-
January.
It is a conflicting point that 3 years you can't have one, but you can get spanked on the hand or hammered, and then you can continue. But usually we've addressed that in the next rules.
We'll definitely put that on the agenda for next month as a topic of discussion.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Number 11, 2017-044-001. The respondent appraised complainant's home for an FHA loan request for a purchase price of $329,900. And the complainant takes issue with the appraisal value being $307,000. And the complainant has a huge problem with the fact that the respondent concluded the subject property was not a bi-level home and therefore only considered, a little more than half of the square footage the complainant feels like should have been considered. So the respondent stated the home was 1,895 square feet, and the complainant feels that it should have been listed at 3,261 square feet. The complainant called the county appraiser's office, and she was told she's being taxed for the full square footage to 3,261 square feet, and that her home was listed as a bi-level home with the appraiser's office. Let's see. The respondent denies that she misrepresented the home in any way in her report and feels the complainant may just be misinformed and an unknowledgeable seller. So the respondent does not fault complainant for her concerns. Respondent provided the MLS listing, which designates the subject property as a, quote, traditional style home with above grade living area and a basement area. Respondent states the tax records indicate a bi-level home, which in Davidson County means that part is above grade and part is below grade. The actual appraisal report stated the subject property is, quote, a split foyer home that offered both above and below grade living areas. And respondent feels that she correctly broke it down in the report. The expert reviewer stated that the complainant also took some issues with the comparables that were used. The expert reviewer stated that the comparables appear to be similar and handled in a consistent manner, finds no indication of misleading information or negligence on the part of respondent. Any of the violations of USPAP that were committed by respondent were not an attempt to mislead the client. The report meets the standards for compliance with the ethics rule, the record-keeping rule, and the competency rule of USPAP. So the few violations that the expert noted, he interpreted as minor. He makes sure to quote that USPAP states several times that, quote, perfection is impossible to attain and competence does not require perfection. So you can have some violations and it still be a competent report. Based on the respondent's history of no discipline and the lack of violations or any minor ones, the recommendation is to dismiss and close this complaint.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Number 12, 2017-046641. Complainant is a licensed real estate agent. He filed this complaint against respondent because he feels that respondent was hired by an appraisal service to do an appraisal for a USDA loan, but actually did an appraisal for a conventional loan. The respondent confirms that his firm was engaged to perform a conventional URAR appraisal by the appraisal service in June 2017. Respondent states the client wanted language and certifications inserted into the report after the appraisal was completed, attempting to change it from a conventional appraisal to one that meets the requirements of FHA/USDA. This would be in conflict with the engagement letter between respondent and the client, which had a clear, specific engagement requirements. The respondent feels he completed the appraisal in accordance with the instructions from the client, and then he offered to do a new report based on the new assignment parameters after he returned from vacation, and denies ever saying anything like, quote, he didn't care or that this wasn't his problem, which the complainant brings up and alleges that he said over the phone. Respondent states that he's not been paid for his services like the complainant alleges. Counsel finds no evidence of any USPAP violations, and respondent has never been disciplined in 26 years of being licensed, and therefore I recommend dismissal and closure.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, who verified that the original appraisal engagement letter was for conventional rather than FHA? Did anyone verify that?
I did. I looked at the engagement letter.
And so there was nothing in the engagement letter that indicated FHA or USDA
No, not that I saw.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Number 13, 2017-051051. There were 3 separate complaints filed against the respondent here regarding the same appraisal, and the 3 complaints were combined into this single matter. Complainant 1 alleges respondent provided an inaccurate appraisal of her home, resulting in the loss of a contract. Complainant 2 states the subject property was under contract for $915,000, but the respondent's appraisal was for $843,000. Complainant 3 is the seller and alleges respondent's appraisal was significantly less than 2 recent appraisals, including the amount appraised in the tax records for the subject property. It's also alleged that respondent submitted the report late. Respondent's attorney sent in respondent's response to these 3 complaints and confirms respondent was hired on July 6, 2017 by an appraisal management company. Respondent states she had no interactions with the 3 complainants. She understands they're disappointed, but she denies the allegations entirely and affirmatively states she performed the appraisal diligently and appropriately. The respondent summarized how she went about developing the appraisal and the opinions. An expert reviewer reviewed the report and noted that most of the report was adequately described and analyzed, but found 4 violations. And based on the respondent's disciplinary history, just in the last 6 years, she just settled a matter this year for $4,000 civil penalty and has had to take 60 hours of coursework since 2014. My recommendation is to assess a $1,000 civil penalty for each of the violations. So that would be $4,000 in civil penalties and at least 40 hours of additional coursework to be decided by the commission if the commission feels it's applicable.
We have a recommendation. Is there a motion?
Well, to get the discussion going, yes, I move to accept.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Question for
I'm just
council.
wondering, did this person learn anything from all those courses they've already been assigned to take?
I don't feel they have. I don't feel these violations warrant a suspension or anything worse than a civil penalty and possibly additional coursework. So I feel like I don't really have a choice. If the violations were, if the report was incompetent or if the expert found something like that, I would feel like maybe a suspension was warranted here. But because the expert did not find that, I felt we would punish them to the max, which is $1,000 per violation. The coursework.
This person has 14 years of experience. This isn't someone who, I don't know, is just learning the ropes or anything, and just, I'm not sure. It's kind of a little disturbing.
I agree.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes, a question. The violation that was just closed in 17, within the last couple of months? 2017, anyway, this year.
It probably would have been, closed and signed within the last few months, but it was something that looks like it was open probably really early in the year.
So it was a $4,000 civil penalty.
Yes,
and then
just like this.
And then in 14, we had another issue. It almost appears to me these are just cost of doing business, and let's just keep on moving. I'm wondering, should we ask this individual to come in here and look us in the eye and just ask them, what are you doing? Is that something we can do? History is pretty difficult to swallow, and they've been in here 3 times recently, or 2 times in the last couple of years, and we've got 3 consolidated into 1 right now.
Right.
It's obvious something's not clicking, and I'd like for this person to explain what's not clicking, because I don't know how we move forward at this juncture.
Had an issue come up like this, within the last few months, and I know when Commissioner Tankersley was on the board, he met with that individual and kind of just talked to him and walked through, what's going on, like why are you missing this? And then he made a report, and we came back to the commission with that. So that's something we could do with a one-on-one setting, since this is all anonymous. We can't get him to come in here and explain it, but we'd be more than willing to try to set up a one-on-one with somebody if somebody wants to meet with them.
Are they in East, Middle, West Tennessee?
We can look that up, but if that's the route that you all want to go, we can. The motion could be to have an informal conference with this individual. When we get back upstairs, Erica and I will look up where they're located and reach out to each commissioner in that area and see who has availability and set it up on your time.
That seems like a more reasonable approach to take. It doesn't look like the coursework by itself is really having the effect that we would expect.
I think that's definitely the way to go here. If that's something we can do, I'm in total agreement with that recommendation.
I'd make a move for an informal conference.
A second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Number 14, this is our last one, 2017-054471. This complaint was filed against the respondent who works at the county assessor's office. The respondent also has his individual appraiser's license, but this complaint and this complainant takes issue with a tax assessment that was done on his property through the tax assessor or the county assessor's office. The respondent did not perform any private appraisal services for this complainant. He was just acting in his job role as not as a licensed appraiser, if that makes sense. And the respondent basically confirms that the only other issue the complainant mentions is that the complainant had requested some documentation from the office before a hearing in front of the Board of Equalization, and says that they did not give him those documents and never intended to. But there's no proof or evidence of that, and the respondent does confirm that the complainant requested documentation, but states that the office's policy just does not provide such data before the hearing because the burden of proof was on the complainant to prove his position. So those really are the only issues, and counsel recommends dismissal of this complaint because respondent was not acting as a private appraiser, but in his capacity as an employee at a county office, and our office does not have jurisdiction over the county assessor's office.
We have a recommendation. Is there a motion?
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. That completes our legal side of the meeting. Moving on to new business.
Thank you. Is the commission okay with us proceeding? Does anyone need to take a break? We probably have, between the two topics or so, an hour left. Does that sound about right?
Would it be possible to continue on, and if you need a break, take it?
Absolutely. We're good. I just
convenience?
wanted to check with everyone. Is that okay, Dr. McCara, Ms. Rosie?
Oh, yes.
Okay, we will continue then. On the agenda, I did list briefly the AMC complaints and disciplinary history. Not much to add. I think that we've seen our first round start here, and so in the rules that we will be adding here soon, we're going to be taking into account part of what the appraiser subcommittee is adding for the AMC businesses, the new fee, that kind of thing. I did want to inform everyone that just maybe the Tuesday last week was short with the holiday. We were informed that the states adding AMC information to the main registry has been extended. It was due to be done by February, so they've given us till June 4th, and we'll keep you posted. But something that at the January meeting we'll discuss probably in greater depth is that audit piece. Part of the changes, I don't know if everyone had a chance to look at that document for the appraiser subcommittee on some of the amendments to it, and so one of the things there is auditing records for the AMCs, and of course I want us to talk about how the commission would like us to do that. We obviously don't have staff in the office that just does that kind of thing, but we've got some suggestions, so we can talk about that when we're all together in greater depth. So under new business on your iPads, the first thing that we have is a discussion again regarding evaluations, number 6. And this is, thank you, Chairman Garrison, very much for putting this together for us so we can talk about this. This keeps coming up more and more, so I will turn it over to you.
At our May meeting, we discussed evaluations and trying to come up with some clarification for appraisers and for the marketplace. Far as who can do an evaluation, and in the state of Tennessee is unique, and I think just here recently a few other states joined Tennessee in allowing appraisers to do evaluations. I think the number is about 6 now. But one thing that was discussed in May is just coming up with some Q&As And I sort of put something together for discussion purposes. And I guess, is this right? If we look over this, it would be submitted to the Attorney General? Is that the process?
So basically what we'll do on this is we'll let everybody here review it. I mean, if you all want to take it home and think about if anybody has any more that they want to add, change, I'll go through and make sure everything is on the legal up and up and probably run it up through our chain. And then from there, Roxana can put it on the website as something. So yeah, if everybody, I mean, we can make changes today, or if everybody wants to take it home and think on it, additions, suggestions.
January meeting going to be packed?
The fact that we don't have a hearing now, I don't think it will be as busy. We also asked the two legal people to prepare as many things for the legal report today so that we could focus on other business in January. So, and since Robin will be out, I think she was trying to get more on it than.
Do we want to, since we're limited in number, wait until January to go over this?
Totally up to the commission, yes.
Did Commissioner Garrison do the Q&A?
Yes.
Yes.
Like, for instance, this one, it's a great question. It says, does your license number on an evaluation make it an appraisal? Parentheses, assuming the report is written to meet evaluation guidelines. Answer no, as long as it meets the requirements set forth by IAG and states it's not appraisal. A license number is permitted on the evaluation. I think that's a great question. I was just wondering, was that your interpretation, or did you find that somewhere?
I could not find any place where it states you cannot put a license number on it. However, it's the word on the street is you're not supposed to. And so I guess that's one of the main questions that we need to clarify, and it would help the legal side with complaints and if we clear it up.
I agree with you. If it says it doesn't say you can't, and the state law says that an appraiser can, then I don't see where there's a problem with it. The only thing that I know happens in the market is the lenders and clients would not hire, Miss Jane Adams over here that's not an appraiser to do an evaluation. They're going to hire Jane Adams' sister who has a certification number. So then all of a sudden, are they looking at hiring that evaluator with a different hat? I don't know.
Well, we wanted Rex to write these up because, I mean, you all are hearing it just as much as we are. I mean, I think it was the beginning of the month, we got an email from Randy Button asking what our take was on evaluations. I said, great job. We just talked about this in the May meeting. I can tell you exactly.
I think this is absolutely great to have this on the website, because we get questions about this all the time, and there's always, well, I think it's this way, or I think it's that way. As long as the AG looks at it and says, hey, it seems to be in compliance, at least it would give some type of guideline and criteria for the
So yeah, what I would suggest is
evaluator or whatever you want.
everybody take a read over this. Anybody that has comments, email them directly to me, or if you want to make additions, I will work off of Rex's document that he sent me, and then we'll put it back on the agenda for next month and kind of get your final blessing on the whole thing, and then go from there.
I think part of the issue is the appraisal, designations. If you have an MAI designation, it states that you are not to do an evaluation.
That's no longer the case.
Oh, did they change it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
I will make sure everyone has this emailed version so you've got something to start with. And as Sarah said, so that she has a beginning, if you use either the review feature within Word or however you want to add your comments or add to them, that is great. And I think every program welcomes questions and answers like this. So once it's been vetted and approved, it will definitely help.
Well, the one thing, we don't review evaluations for compliance because there's, I don't think we have that authority, but this would certainly help keep people going in the right direction, because occasionally we get things turned in that are evaluations.
And I think that's probably a caveat that we would put on the top of these FAQs, that it is not within our authority to review, evaluations. These are just guidance for appraisers, because
Advisory opinion.
we are getting we are getting these questions a lot, and it's coming from all different directions.
It's AI.
Is there any other new business?
Yes, so on your iPads, and I apologize, Dr. McCara and Ms. Rosie, that you don't have these. They came through to us Wednesday right before the holiday, so I don't believe they were emailed to you. We'll try to briefly, they're just points of discussion that, because they were sent to the office, to our chair as well, we thought were worth discussing. So item number 7 is the letter from the Appraisers Subcommittee. This is a waiver request that they have. I'll let the group read it briefly and quickly. Basically, they have gotten a request from a TriStar Bank official requesting a waiver for all of 2018 to be able to use, I guess, in-house staff to do appraisals that don't have to be appraisers. And correct me if I'm summarizing this quickly. Because there is not enough to turn around the required report within a respectable time frame, I assume, and they are citing the counties that this is an issue in, and so I just wanted everyone to review. It is nothing that we are expected to respond to. However, this letter was addressed and sent directly to Jim Park, and he said, if we had any questions, to let him know. So I just thought, since we're meeting now and they may be making a decision before our next meeting, I definitely wanted it to be reviewed. I did also want to share that this is the first time in the country that this type of request has been made. So it does set precedents. The board office was not asked for any reports, so I can give you numbers on our statistics as far as certified generals, and I ran this just coincidentally 2 weeks ago, so they're not as of today, but on certified generals we have 835, certified residential 933. I had run it for AMCs. I believe we had 156 AMCs. I was looking for something at that time. So those are the numbers. The majority are in the middle Tennessee area, and 2 of the counties listed here would be Davidson County and Williamson. So open it for discussion for our 2 members that are on the phone, unfortunately unable to read it. I'm sure they'll have questions. I don't mind emailing this letter as well. I just wanted us to take a look in case we had specifics we wanted to send to Mr. Park.
I would like a letter, just emailed, so I can look at it.
Absolutely, Rosie.
What is the, I'm just reading through this, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what their request is. Is there something that's changed?
Yes.
That I'm missing? I mean,
Yeah. So about 6 or 8 months ago, I guess, it was proposed to, because of the appraisal shortage throughout the country, that a bank, if they can identify an area where they are having a shortage, that they can apply for appraisal waiver, which basically will allow an unlicensed individual to do a quote-unquote appraisal for their financial institution.
and this was brought, a proposal from who? Who brought this forward? I mean, it's not
It's a banking commissioner, isn't it?
in the state of Tennessee? Or
No, it's national. It's national. It's
But this, okay, I see what you're saying.
I don't know specifically what, but it is on the books that it is available for you to apply for. This is the first application in the country.
So the Fed said it's okay then?
The Fed said it's okay.
Okay,
yes.
so who has to make the approval? The legislature or the?
The ASC. This
ASC
letter's
will.
going to the ASC.
Yes.
They have to
The
approve
ASC
it.
has to say it's,
Okay or not, and this is their
And so-
first round. This is the first one that they've received.
okay. So the Fed said it's okay, and the ASC makes the decision with or without our input.
Correct. Now, our questions probably, if we had questions or so forth, would be taken. I know Jim Park and his staff usually watch our meetings as well. They are always welcome to see our concerns. I want to make sure that you all saw this, and if there's anything that I should be asking him.
What is the criteria for the shortage? I mean, how do they measure that?
Well, that's the piece that I was a little confused on because, thank the authority. So this comes under section 1119B, title 21, and this is 12 USC 3348, section B, allows the ASC, subject to occurrence of the FFIEC, to temporarily waive certification or licensing requirements in particular areas. And this is the scarcity of real appraisers is one of those reasons. But they don't have reports from us. Right now, any type of report is not out there for the general public. They ask for it as a public records request, and we make it available in 2 days at the most. So that has not been looked out or requested yet.
May not be reading this right, but this seems to negate the whole appraisal system.
What I just said.
It brings it all down
Yep.
to nothing.
I mean, you
And
I
it's
didn't know they
opening the
had this
door
authority.
for some
this is too
major
much.
issues.
Major issues.
And the state of Tennessee is going to be stuck with it.
So it seems when we say the feds, we use that term broadly. What particular, and I think Commissioner Bennett knows more about where it originated from, but it looks like that one particular agency came up with an executive order and said, we're going to consider this. And ASC, you're going to abide by it. So if they could do that, they could come up with an executive order to just do away with all these regulations and make them go away. I mean, I don't understand how that can come through without some type of vetting and process and voting process of something.
This has been a long discussed issue, probably mostly stemming from 2017, because you had kind of a perfect storm. Requirements got much more stringent for appraisers. You have less appraisers coming into the market. I know there's been a lot of statistics that appraisers are aging. I think that number has really been manipulated.
Another big component, I mean, of his letter is that, the fees have increased some. I mean, the reality of it is since 2008, fees have been after the market tanked,
Right.
Fees went down, or at least, I'm not talking about, I'm just saying in general. And then now that they've started climbing back up to where appraisers can make a living, you have this coming in here going, well, fees are up, so we want a waiver so we don't have to get an appraisal anymore. I mean, this just all smells bad. I'm sorry.
They're going back to 2013 timeframe. 2013, things were relatively slow in transaction-wise in that time frame, and they probably got used to the quick turn times. Why not go back to the time frame pre-recession and look at what the turn times were, and the element of pushing it, and the one thing too, you've got to learn from your mistakes. And post-recession, in what I saw and doing a lot of revaluations, a lot of the issues was because they got in a hurry to begin with. And so now we're trying to push this up again for the sake of just closing a loan and not taking any precaution to what's going to happen. And the thing is, we predicted it was going to happen eventually. It did. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this is going to hit the brick wall again. And so are we going to go forward without any precaution or any, and this is just opening the door for fraud. I'll go ahead and say it. It's opening the door for anything. I remember 2 years ago, an issue came up, and somebody said, well, we're going to end up in the Wild Wild West again. This is opening the door for the Wild Wild West again.
I think a couple of the things in here specifically is the fact that you probably have less of that with a small community bank because they have a vested interest in keeping their assets in line for what they have.
I would disagree. And in a conversation I just had with a banker recently, he was sort of joking about their evaluations that they're doing in-house, and they review each other's evaluations for closing loans. There's no accountability.
And even,
Well, and that's another thing. They are talking about increasing the evaluation threshold for commercial properties to $400,000 next year. And there is a page 2 to this. You may want to.
yeah, page 2 I find interesting because it gives 3 options to consider, one of which actually names vendors by name, rather than using I understand, I mean, it's got the vendor's name there.
Yeah.
Could be, I mean, that seems to me
And
like
I don't think
that's not,
based on the current guidelines that are in place, I don't think that's something that we could do.
I don't think
on
that's
something
fair.
outside the threshold.
I don't think that's fair to the, I mean, it doesn't name a particular realtor or a brokerage firm or a particular MLS database, so I don't think you should be identifying.
This is the first I've seen it.
So I believe under the part of the rules that Jim will have to respond within 30 days or so, and that was before our next meeting. So obviously they'll have a chance to listen to your concerns and thoughts and opinions since we're on the record. And
Are they going to reach out to us individually, or is this all we're going to get?
meaning the ASC?
Yes.
I doubt it. I think this is it, and then they'll
So
have
they
a
can-
chance to respond or ask additional questions. So they'll hear your concerns because we're on the record, and if we've got anything else, or if you want to send me an email with some other thoughts after you've had a chance to get home, I'll be happy to get that to Jim.
And I'd be curious to know, it's stated in here that there's one certified general appraiser in Dixon County.
Yeah, that seems.
Well, again, we've not presented a formal report, so I personally don't even know that that's the case.
I know it's
We can
difficult to
see-
get business
Yeah.
done out there.
But, that's always been the case. Let's go to another profession. How many CPAs are there? Are they unable to do their tax returns? How many attorneys are there? That's just the rural nature. And to take one profession and say, well, just because there's not enough of you, let's just do away with it. I think.
I think
Here's
the
the
difference is you can go to a CPA, you can't go to an appraiser.
But it doesn't specifically say which county, does it? Or it uses that as an
example.
An
Yeah,
example.
There's 4 counties listed
counties.
where
But
they do
then
the
they're
majority of the
looking
work.
at working in Dixon, Maury, and Williamson and Davidson. Yeah, there's no appraisers in Williamson and Davidson. I'm pretty sure of that. So I don't understand what particular region they're wanting a waiver for. Sounds like to me their entire
It's asked for
Indiana.
everywhere, for everything. And I think,
And they-
my understanding is Mr. Park can say, you're given a waiver for this time frame for this specific area.
I think Mr. Park needs to understand how many appraisers are in Davidson County and Williamson County.
Oh, and
as
I
well.
think he'll actually, so Mr. Park is their executive director, like Roxanne is to you all. He'll present it to the commission. This letter was also sent to Arthur Lindo, I believe, and he is I believe he's their chairman.
But doesn't the ASC makes a decision? Is it the board or is it Mr. Park that makes the decision?
I believe it's the board.
Is there any precedent for this in any other state?
No, this is, I did not early on know that it was the first in the entire country, but after looking into it, this is the first letter of its kind. Definitely was the first for us, but knowing it's the first in the country. So they do have kind of guidelines. The federal, they're going to have a 30-day comment period, but given that it impacts us directly, I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to kind of look at it first and send me, I guess, anything else besides what we've said on the record for Mr. Park to consider.
What's the composition of the ASC board?
Oh, it's real specific.
Yeah, it's on their website. Hold on.
Would it be lenders and users of appraisal services, or would it be something that's not directly related?
Sarah will have that breakdown
So
for
they're
us.
talking all property types doing a waiver, commercial, residential, the works.
That's what is asked for.
Certified appraiser for loans requested between January and December.
So they're anticipating someone in-house in a community bank to be able to handle a complex commercial property.
These three options.
Well, it's one of the three.
So, once that appraisal or whatever they're doing is done, we wouldn't have jurisdiction to even review it, would we?
No.
It would fall under the exemption.
But if an appraiser goes out and stubs their toe walking out that door, they're going to get hammered with $4,000 fine and 30 hours of education. I'm just asking.
So their board is made up of someone who is the Division of Banking, Supervision, and Regulation under the Federal Reserve System, Deputy Comptroller of Credit Risk with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, Office of Housing and Regulatory Policy, which is under the Federal Housing Finance Agency, someone out of the FDIC Boston area office and the Division of Risk Management Supervision, Enforcement and Fair Lending, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Office of Examination and Insurance under the National Credit Union Administration, and it looks like Office of Housing, Single Family Program Development, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
It doesn't seem to me like the situation they're describing is unique to Tennessee. That's what I just, are they using us as sort of we'll see if it works there and then we could try it elsewhere?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's been a lot of discussions at, Bankers Association throughout the country about who's going to be the first one to try and do this, who's got the best chance of getting approval for it. I would say there's a lot of other areas. You can get into some areas in rural Alabama where there's an issue and there's a lack of appraisers. But, I don't know if this is a solution.
One problem about rural areas is a lack of data, and it makes a rural appraisal more complex. So with regard to complexity, it should take a little more time to do it, but for the sake of time, they're trying to expedite the valuation process to close a loan. This is bad, period.
In regard to complexity, it would also require a greater competency of the person doing the appraisal, and someone who didn't have that competency wouldn't be able to do it. Now this is a house of cards about to come down.
Yep.
If it's not stopped.
What are we expected to do with this? Comment on it, or say no, or?
So the email from Jim Parks basically shared this with us, the statute that it falls under, and just, sharing the letter that it's under their review, but if we had any questions, to let him know. So obviously we've discussed it. He'll be able to watch your concerns and hear them. If you have any other questions or concerns you want to put in writing for me to forward to Jim, I know that he would probably welcome those, but it's their full board is going to review this, and they've got all the different players there that will have to look at it, and it's not for us to make the decision.
Looks like
one
Dr.
of the things that I've kind of learned in my time on this commission is that our job is not to protect or really support the appraisers per se, but to make sure that the public is protected, the consumer is protected. And I'm not sure that this really does that based on some of the things that, we've discussed here about, these are very complex issues. When you're out in the country, there's not a whole lot of comparables and other things like that. And I'm just wondering if this is just an idea whose time has not yet come. And I don't know whether they're trying us out to see how it plays in Poughkeepsie or and to take it on from there. But I think there's some serious issues here that make me very uncomfortable, and I'm not even an appraiser.
And I think that's the type of feedback that Mr. Park is actually looking for. Under the procedure that he sent to Roxanna and I, it does say that they are required under their procedure to send a copy to the state agency in which the request came from. So I think that's what he's looking for, is just how we feel about this. So I think all comments he will appreciate.
And we are the first.
Yes. Yes.
Yep, this is the first request that's been made.
And we're the most rural?
I don't know about Davidson County and Williamson County.
Not growing.
Okay, so Dr. McCara and Ms. Rosie, I will definitely get this letter emailed to you, and so that you can fully read it, and then I will let.
We don't have it.
No, you don't.
Can you send it to all the commissioners,
Yes,
please?
yes.
Thank you.
Email will go to everyone. Randy has seen it. He was also carbon copied as the chair, so he's definitely wanted to discuss, even though he was not going to be present. He'll be able to watch and hear, and then I will let Jim Parks know that we definitely had our questions voiced, and kind of have him walk us through if they've got any other questions or things they want to share.
I will be shocked if it's not all over with the Appraisal Institute sending a copy out very shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah, has the other organizations been, have they seen?
Professional organizations.
Has other professional organizations and across the state or nationally privy to this letter?
The only people that we know that received this letter was Mr. Park at the ASC, and then also his chairman, and the Tennessee Department of Financial Institutions commissioner received a copy of it as well.
Can this be passed on?
At this point, it's public record.
At this
since
point-
it's in the hearing.
That's right.
Yeah, at this point, it's a public record since we're
Public
discussing
record at
it.
this juncture, okay.
Can the board issue a combined statement of displeasure with this?
I think essentially what we'll do is Roxana will write up an email to Jim or get on the phone with him and let him know, or ask him how he wants it, if he wants it in a formal letter. Obviously, if we do a formal letter, we will send it out to you all to review. But looking at this here, for those other, associations in the state, it says, if initiated, the ASC promptly publishes notice in the Federal Registry for a 30-day comment period. So I believe that would be the time where those individuals and associations could write in.
See, they're asking for January 1st, so to start. So there's probably no way that that's going to occur with the comments in 30 days.
There won't be.
On record, an individual commissioner says that the state of Tennessee would be in great distress to protect the public trust of our citizens of our state if this goes through.
Second that.
Make the, is this a motion or you? What are we doing here?
I was an individual
I'm
on
ready for the
record.
vote.
That's all I was, an individual on record.
Okay, so that will go out via email to everyone. We have one more not so, what's the word I want to use? Controversial maybe of a letter on your last item. Number 8 on your iPads. This too did not get a chance to get emailed to Dr. McCara and Ms. Johnson. I apologize. This is just a letter for your information. It came from the Attorney General's office on documents that were requested to be reviewed by them, and you're welcome to glance through. There's no action that we need to take on this. Let me know if you don't get a chance to open it.
Sorry, what item was that?
The last one on your, it should be number 8.
Teleconference minutes?
I think it should be
That's his letter
recommended.
to the AG's office.
I think it should be recommended that all real estate agents have to take some kind of appraisal education course based on this letter.
Trying to put more work on me.
I got it. Hold on, I don't know. Well,
Steal it from you, and I'll switch with you.
Here, do you want mine?
Thank you.
Did I lose you?
Nope, we still got you.
Okay,
There-
just making sure.
Yep.
It's very quiet. I just want
Yeah.
to make sure my phone didn't cut me off
No,
accidentally.
they're just reading through the letter that was sent over. It was
That's fine.
sent to the National Association of Realtors and the Appraisal Foundation. And
What are we supposed to do with it?
I mean, in my opinion, to sum it up, they're basically talking about real estate agents appraising. I think this is probably more of a matter for my other commission, the Real Estate Commission, and I will probably forward this on to my executive director. But it appears that it's probably more of a Real Estate Commission issue as opposed to an appraiser issue.
Can you get me a copy of that?
Yes, ma'am, we will.
Okay.
Well, it well describes the issues that exist between appraisers and realtors. Still exists. I don't know how you solve this.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting that it said appraisers are typically their own bosses and no one oversees their work. Same could be said for a principal broker. I mean, they have people under them, but they don't have anybody over them usually, so. And that's why we have commissions. They can handle those issues, so. But yeah, like you said, there's no action that needs to be taken on this. It just came in, and Roxanna thought that you all should see it, and
In the meeting with a chuckle.
yeah, you know.
And that is all that we have, so.
No further business. Do I hear a motion?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. It is 12:30. Thank you very much. Ms. Johnson, Dr. McCara, we will sign you out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.